Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about two Arnold Schwarzenegger classics from the 1980s. This was requested by a friend of mine, Elle, who listens to the podcast. This will make a change, she said, from all of José's gay films. Let's watch Commando and Predator. And I've got to say, for a gay man, I think there's a lot to enjoy in these.
Well, I mean, little does your friend know, but, I edited a book on action cinema, and it was partly because of my interest in Arnold Schwarzenegger films, yeah? I mean, I think he is a kind of a landmark figure, obviously, in 80s cinema, in representations of the body and how they changed. In sci-fi, actually, there's, I have a whole history with him because, there was a moment where at Warwick I was teaching the Hollywood cinema module, and I had put a picture of Schwarzenegger in the cover sheet of the module, and the psychology department, I've since been made to understand that the psychology department, was so upset by it. They thought that it was just so trivial and stupid and trash that they forbade their students to take that module as an option later on. And yet, films like The Terminator and so on are, amongst the most significant achievements of that decade. So there you go, your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, part of her interest as well was the fact that I said I hadn't seen them. I only saw The Terminator, the first one, for the first time 3 or 4 months ago. I'd seen the second one a lot. But I hadn't seen that until recently. I hadn't seen Commando at all. I hadn't seen Predator at all. I've not seen Conan, his other films from the 80s. So, although I'm very aware of Schwarzenegger as a star and a persona and all that kind of thing, hadn't actually seen a lot of his work.
Right.
So it was interesting to me.
Well, these are the films that kind of made his career, made him a significant figure because, the thing is that in the 70s, his body was so strange. I forget who called him, like a condom stuffed with walnuts, right? The body was just so bizarre in that decade that he required special casting. So, in Stay Hungry, where he has a small role, he was a bodybuilder. Yeah, and then, of course, Pumping Iron, which was a big hit as a documentary, was all about him pumping iron. Or it was about the Minster Universe contest and so on. So, and then of course the Conan films, are again, it was like, okay, he fit into that world because it was a world of fantasy and witchcraft and comic books, right? So, the genre could accommodate that body. But I think there was a real sense that he couldn't be otherwise cast. I mean, the accent was so bizarre. The body was then so strange, right? That actually these small budget, almost no frills action films, are what demonstrated that there was a market for these films and that, Schwarzenegger was a big star, right? So, Conan was stunt casting in a way, Conan the Barbarian. And of course, The Terminator is a kind of stunt casting. So you could cast him as an alien and a robot, and you could certainly kind of, cast him as a mythological figure from comic books, but could he play an ordinary person? I mean, he's never ordinary, Schwarzenegger, but, I think these action films are the ones where, he began to be cast in those ways as a soldier, as a general, and... Yeah,
they're at least casting him as human in these.
Yes,
like in these, he plays a human being, although he is still a kind of a G.I. Joe like action figure. He's still not a human, but at least he's not a robot or a god this time.
Well, the films are not meant to be realistic, right? I mean, I think Commando is so much fun. I mean, you said yesterday, which I think is a wonderful description, is like meathead movies, right? Or movies from meatheads. I forget what you said.
Yeah, no, I said I just started watching it and I texted you about 10-15 minutes in and said this is the most meat-headed film I think I've seen in my life. And I've seen quite a few, but like this was just I knew of the 80s meat-headed thing, and it's not just Schwarzenegger, it's Stallone as well and Dolph Lundgren and people like that. But it's like it's Commando really it's really concisely meat-headed, you know?
Yeah. Well, you see, I was very interested in these films because, you know, they were low-budget films. I think Commando was $9 million, right? And they were big hits. I mean, I think Commando grossed 54, and then they doubled the budget for Predator, and they also doubled the gross, right?
Let me just quickly get the stats up for you. I'm just getting them. Commando cost 9 million, as you say, and made 57.5 in 1985. Predator in 87 cost between 15 and 18 million and made almost 100.
Right. So it demonstrated that there was a market. And actually, I thought the films were overly sneered at, you know, because obviously Terminator is a great film. I think Conan, the first one, is really kind of gobsmacking. It's got all this Nietzschean philosophy, and you know, it's almost like fascistic, or maybe not even almost, right? But you know, but they're very intriguing films. And then these low budget actioners, you know, I thought they provided, you know, what was in the package, right? You know, they're really fun to watch. They're almost cartoony. You know, they're slightly ridiculous. They're full of one-liners that make you aware, hey, this is a movie all the time, right? You know, so I mean, it's not art. It's not trying to be art, but they're quite fun.
The first one was definitely fun. Commando, I had a really good time. I started off having not a very good time with, and I was texting Elle, who told me to watch it, saying, "How dare you? Well, what have you done to me? This is awful." And then I started to get into its swing of things, and I started to understand actually that it had a sense of humour, you know, and it makes lots of good jokes. It has lots of good lines, and the reason to watch it is not 100% ironic. I think there's an element of that. Arnold Schwarzenegger can't really act at this point in his career. Maybe he never could, but he really can't in Commando. But actually, there are lots of decent jokes in it, and some quite creative and well put together action that I enjoyed. So I got into the swing of things. Predator, on the other hand, didn't have a very good time with. I just thought it took itself too seriously, wasn't scary enough, and was kind of, well, I suppose I say again, too meat-headed, but not in a fun way this time.
It's interesting because I thought Predator was the better film, in my view, but I had less of a good time in it, with it, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it, yeah.
I mean, one of the things that surprised me, you know, because I saw all of these films when they came out, and one of the things that surprised me that I didn't appreciate at the time was, you know, how young and good-looking and appealing Schwarzenegger is. Yeah, I mean, kind of, you're now used to seeing him, obviously, as an old man, right? And, you know, he is filmed like a movie star, right? Like, you know, you see his skin and his blue eyes, and, you know, they display his body, like the scene where, you know, he takes, I don't know what it is, a boat up the beach or something, and it really is only there, you know, for you to see his body, really, you know.
When he's got his top off.
Yeah.
Is that on the seaplane?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. He takes a dinghy up, and,
Yeah. So,
and he's just in his trunks.
And actually, that in itself is very interesting, you know, because these films were all aimed at men. So this was like the first, maybe not the first, I don't know about first, but certainly it made me aware that heterosexual men were checking each other out. Yeah, right. You know, the whole bodybuilding craze, you know, was well underway. And it was like, ooh, you know, how big is he? And, you know, how big can I get? It was all about bigness, right? So, I mean, you know, he's not filmed to elicit desire, but actually his film is put on display. And I think it is, you know, as a way for men to measure bigness or to appreciate bigness or, big muscles. You have lots of close-ups of his muscles and so on, right?
Yeah, and he's always glistening. He's covered in sweat or water or something, and he really shines, literally, on screen. Yes. He pops, and that moment where he rows that dinghy, there's a shot from him kind of filmed from below, making him look powerful up on his torso, and he's tensing his pecs. Yeah. And it's like, that's just not realistic, right? He's doing it. It's just a thing to show off with. It's like, yes. I also noticed a moment in Predator where Carl Weathers has his top open, and he's kind of by a tree panting, and he's sucking his stomach in and putting it out, and it's like, that's not how you breathe. But it's just showing off movement of musculature. Yeah.
Though, you know, when you're talking about Schwarzenegger not being very good, I actually think he is very good, I mean, he's not good as an actor in the sense of inhibiting character, but he's very good as a showman, right? So, every he has these glances and these looks that are almost like a punctuation mark to a joke, or they're an effect, or, he's very good at creating all of those things, which somebody like Carl Weathers, for example, is not.
No, absolutely. Well, I think what I said was he can't really act, as opposed to he's not very good, and they are two different things.
Yes.
And it's true that at this point in his career, he's not inhabiting a character, as you say, but he does know how to show off and put those comic moments on. And like, there's a bit in the car in Commando where the girl she lists off this whole like 5-minute long thing of this is what's happened, and then you punched this guy, and then you shot this guy, and then you picked me up with you, and you're kidnapping me, and what the hell's going on? Are you going to explain it to me? And he goes, no.
No.
Great. Yeah, and he delivers it well. There's lots of that.
And his timing is great,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that is one of the things that he would become famous for. And actually, I think, what people forget is in this, these films started off a whole vogue for similar types of films. There was a period in which these Schwarzenegger actioners intersected with, what Stallone was doing, which at that time was at a much higher level. It was much more expensive films and so on, right? But also, it kind of, it led to Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal and Dolph Lundgren, as you said, right? Which were much cheaper, kind of usually much worse made, right? So I think, in this landscape, these films stand out as, good journeyman actioners,
Yeah. So you say you had a worse time with Predator than you did with Commando. And I think we've both established that Commando is good fun.
Yes.
But Predator is seen kind of exclusively, seen by everyone as the better film.
Yes, it is. I think it is.
I mean, I would have to say I think it is too, but I can't reconcile it with the fact that I had a less good time. And the fact that I had a good time in Commando was not constituent on the fact that it is not very good, because it's not very good. It's all right. I just think it suits my sensibility better.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the film was obviously very well liked, and it was well liked enough to lead to a sequel. I think John McTiernan is a better director than, I forget who directed Commando.
Mark L. Lester.
There are images in Commando that are very striking and that are thought through, in the jungle and the uses of the jungle and so on. There are kind of some nice compositions with the alien. Of course, part of the problem of seeing it now is that the special effects are so basic. If one wants to be generous about it.
Yeah, you could say that. Although actually, I actually quite enjoyed all the bits where the alien was invisible and you kind of look through him with that kind of shimmery, like looking through glass effect.
Yes.
I mean, it obviously looks kind of cheap these days and it could be done better, but actually I rather liked it and I thought it was quite effective. And I could see at the time, I could see how it would work on a big screen.
Yeah. Well, those were not the bits that bothered me most, but the bits from his point of view, where it was like a cartoon.
The thermal imaging.
Well, yeah, his vision, when you cut to the alien's vision on things, and really kind of what you get is cartoons, really badly drawn cartoons. I thought that was like, it spoiled the film for me. Yeah.
Fair enough. Although again, I could see how that would work in on the big screen as well, because it does have that feel of, like I was saying to you on I sent you a message saying, like, I can feel it, man. It's hiding in them trees, and when you don't know, obviously I know what the Predator looks like. It's quite a famous creature and it's got a huge franchise built around it. So it wasn't a surprise when it showed up. But still, that feeling of not knowing what it would be, the characters don't know what's stalking them, and you just see this imagery that looks weird and what's he seeing, and I think it's quite fairly effective.
Yes, I mean, I think it's an interesting period in Schwarzenegger's film, and one which, he won't really return to, because, so this is a moment of transition between the Conan films, fantasy, and the sci-fi
Terminator
films. Yeah, Terminator, and also what's the other one that he did in Mars?
Total Recall.
Total Recall, which is great, I think.
Yeah.
You know, so...
he did The Running Man as well in 87, which is a sci-fi
That's
as well.
right. Yeah, so, you know, I think those are all significant films. And then, you know, he'd broach and do comedy. He'd kind of expand and do comedy. And, you know, all of those things are kind of very interesting uses of a persona. But what is very interesting about all these early films is that he creates spaces they're very heterogeneous, right? Maybe because he's so foreign, he makes spaces for people who didn't usually get represented in American cinema. So, you know, you have a lot of blacks and Latinos and native peoples in these films, yeah? Which is very interesting, you know?
Paired up with a black woman in Commando, and in Predator his team is composed of Carl Weathers is a black person, there's another black man, there's, as you say, Native American, and there's a Spanish girl they pick up, a Hispanic girl. Yeah.
So I think all of those things are interesting. I mean, I don't want to make any great film. You know, the only thing I ever claimed for these films anyway was that they were fun, you know, and they were cartoony. And of course, there are questions about, you know, is it better to depict violence in this cartoony, ironic way? You know, does it trivialize it and so on? But, you know, I think certainly at the time I enjoyed it very much, and maybe I haven't developed very much as a person because, you know, Commando, which is not a very good film, was still great fun for those ways, right? Like, you know, so, you know, there's 20 men around him and he lifts his arms and they all, you know, I mean, you know, you could see that in a comic book, but, you know, you'd never seen it in an action film before. It's so stupid. You know,
that's one of the clips that I picked up on. That's one of the clips I put on Facebook. This is so silly.
Yeah, but fun, you know?
Yeah, it is.
Like, you don't mind that it's not real, right? It's almost like you can't believe what's happening. And I think that that's also a characteristic. I mean, he did that other film, True Lies, right? There's the scene in True Lies where he goes with the horse up the lift, right? And then gets to the roof, you know, and then he sees that the villain is on the rooftop swimming pool of another building. And he goes with the horse, right? He gets the horse. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, you know, and so funny. And like, you know, you think, no, that's not going to happen. It's impossible. It can't, you know. And then they do a twist on it, right? Which is brilliant. It's just fun, you know. Though you know, I mean, True Lies is very kind of, you know, anti-Middle Eastern people, I suppose. You know, kind of. There was a period where those were all the villains in American cinema. But so the films are full of interest, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
It's interesting what you say about his nationality having a bearing on kind of the people around him, that sort of thing. Because when I was watching Commando, the film starts off with a character an actor who you don't particularly know. He's not the star. He's killing people, and it's setting up this mystery.
Bill Duke, isn't it? It's Bill Duke. I think so. Who also appears. I mean, we might check that, but I think he also appears in Terminator, and I think he's brilliant.
Yes, I will double check. Bill Duke is Cook in Commando, so he's the one, and in Predator he's Sergeant Mac.
Yeah,
he's great. He's actually quite empathetic, isn't he?
He's wonderful.
When he dies. So Commando starts off with him killing a load of people, and you don't really know why, and it's quite violent and the rest, and very cartoony. And then when Schwarzenegger is introduced, you go to this bucolic kind of lodge in the mountains. It's absolutely beautiful up there. He's living with this 9-year-old girl who is his daughter, luckily, who's a kind of blonde-haired, like everything you hate about the way America casts children. You know, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan, and there's romantic music going on, and they're hand feeding a wild deer, and it's just it's nuts. It's like it's a parody, and it made me think of the Rambo film we saw not long ago. Last Blood, I think it was the one where it looks like it's trying to wrap up the Rambo story or whatever. And we talked about how that film had a kind of ranch in the middle of nowhere. He's kind of taming horses. He's got a young girl with him, his daughter who he takes care of, and it's American myth making, that one. And so I was looking at this and I was kind of thinking about the similarities, because one thing that happens in Commando is very, very early on, like basically Schwarzenegger's first meaningful line of dialogue is about coming from East Germany. and how, I can't remember what the line is exactly, but it's to do with this happened in East Germany and it's different here in America. And there's there's a negotiating immediately around his accent and style, because they have to kind of...
Dutch in Predator, isn't he, as well?
He's called Dutch in Predator, although they don't do the whole, oh, and here's why he has an accent, it's just called Dutch and you live with it. No. So I kind of thought, because we spoke about that kind of setup in Rambo being about American myth-making, I think I said, this is where all Americans believe they'll go when they die. Having Schwarzenegger start off in a similar place in Commando, and then he gets back there afterwards, obviously, after killing everyone and rescuing his daughter, and that's the whole kind of... And then he also ends up with a new girlfriend as well, and a mother figure. It heads in that same direction, I think, as the Rambo film did.
I mean, the thing about American culture is that it's very welcoming. Kind of all you need to become an American is to get your citizenship, and then people have different accents, and but there's no questioning of you as as an American. So and I think kind of Schwarzenegger is proof of that. I mean, he's not the only one, though. I think you had people like Garbo and Ingrid Bergman. They all had accents. Though I suppose if you're a movie star, accents don't matter, right? Like it's your accent, whatever it is, and you can play anything. But nonetheless, there is something kind of very interesting about, somebody whose Austrianness was very much a part of what people knew about him, being so easily integrated into, American popular culture.
Yeah, and not only that, but he became the governor of California. He kind of got extra American, because he got involved in the politics to that level as well, and started representing Americans. That's on a different scale to just getting your citizenship.
I think the only thing you're prevented from doing by not being, if you're not born in America, you can't be president. Everything else you're entitled to.
Yeah, exactly.
Run, for government and so on, which is very different than Germany. I
don't know what the rules are in different countries, to be fair.
Well, I think there are several generations of Turks in Germany who can't get full German citizenship. So,
Oh, sure. I thought you were talking specifically about running for politics, but no, you're right. That is more welcoming in America. You're right. Than most other places. So, once you're American, you're American.
That's right.
At least on an official level. I mean, it could be different on a kind of cultural level in how individuals might see you, but certainly on an official level, you get your citizenship, and as you say, you are an American, and that's just the way it is.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, we're moving away from the films.
But culture, innit?
Yeah. But Ray Don Chong, who I haven't heard of pretty much since. She was quite famous then. She did have a vogue as an actress, but it wasn't very long lasting. And she's the damsel in distress in this, and she's a bit annoying, always screaming and, not bringing much variation to it, but she also has a wonderful presence, like a kind of a warm presence, really.
Yeah.
And, I enjoyed kind of the shenanigans.
And I think she's got comic timing, and, I think she and Schwarzenegger actually play off each other fairly well as well.
Yes.
So you said to me on a text that Arnold Schwarzenegger is your favourite of this period. So what puts him above? What do you like about him more than Stallone?
Well, because Schwarzenegger took more chances, and he was smarter about the choices that he made. And you see, I think it may be Stallone is the person who first introduced that kind of body-built body in the mainstream. But the thing about Schwarzenegger is he's smart, or he comes across as intelligent, and also I think he's very graceful. One of the things about action stars is you've got to be believable in motion. Yeah, and I actually think that Schwarzenegger moves very beautifully. He moves with grace. And he's got crack comic timing, which Stallone didn't have. So.
Do you also think it's just that the films were better?
But the films are also better because he's in them.
Sure.
I mean, he's chosen to be those things, by directors who want to kind of evoke and represent something. So you can ask, well, why wasn't Van Damme chosen for films like that, or why wasn't Steven Seagal chosen for films like that? Or indeed, why did a much, much bigger star at this period, which Stallone really was, why didn't he get involved in interesting? He made, sci-fi films later, after kind of someone like Stallone had established the vogue, He did one, Demolition Man, which I quite like. But, I think that was years after Terminator, yeah.
There was a moment in Commando, right at the start, that I really didn't like, and this was actually Schwarzenegger's first meaningful line of dialogue. It's where he sat at the table with his daughter, and he's reading some magazine, I think it must be one of her magazines, and he says, "Why don't they just call him Girl George? It would stop all the confusion."
Yeah, he's not reading, it's not one of his magazines, it's the famous Cream. It was a famous music magazine.
So it's his daughter's magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it starts off with this kind of homophobic joke, and that's par for the course in the day, I suppose. And then a little bit later on, when they're fighting in the motel room, they bust through into next door because they're so big and they can break through walls. And next door, there's a girl pegging a guy with a dildo, shagging him from behind, which again is like, it's straight sex, but it's a kind of gay form of straight sex that they bust in on. There's something kind of uncomfortable about that, I think.
Well, that was the period, it's the homophobia is very casual, but also, very potent, and it's a sign of how times have changed. They would never do anything like that now. But then it was a given. But I also think, I want to underline that these are, to me, films for a heterosexual male audience. Gay men like myself like them, and women might like them or whatever, but I think its intended audience is really a heterosexual male one. And actually you can see that very much in Predator.
Well, this is what I was going to go on to, because one of the maybe central differences between Commando and Predator is that in Commando, he's really on his own. He teams up with this woman, but really he's on his own. And in Predator, they are a team together and they're getting picked off. So they start off as a group with kind of camaraderie. And when he sees Carl Weathers for the first time in that hut at the start, he greets him as an old friend and they share some banter and they have this arm wrestle. And the shot it's an iconic shot of their two arms, their fists gripping, and the muscle is so huge. And in that, there's a kind of, I think as you implied earlier, homoeroticism in that.
Well, not for me. No, I don't agree, actually. I think, again, it's one of those things signifying power, that other heterosexual men kind of check out, so, and the whole film is like that, really, so you're saying, in Predator it starts off as a group, but they get picked off one by one until only he remains, right? So it really is about this Nietzschean Superman. It's the kind of, or a Darwinian survival of the fittest. And then what happens, because we're told that the Predator doesn't kill people without weapons because he likes the sport. So actually, the final face-off, which lasts, 20, 25 minutes, it's a long chunk of the film where they face off. It's really a macho thing. It's like, who's stronger, who's smarter. Yeah, it's a competition about who's the bigger man. Really, and actually, you could think that, sci-fi normally, has opened up spaces for many different types of sexuality and ways of being, and the left hand of God and things like that. This is really straight out machismo that the film has, which actually maybe is why I also find it, even less entertaining. Yeah, it is it's a very rigid notion of what it is to be a man.
Yeah, well, I think that's
inherent in that standoff.
I think that's what I should have said, or that's kind of where I should have gone, because I think you're right. To describe it as homoerotic is not quite right, but it is about, as you say, for a straight male audience appreciating another man's body.
Yes.
And the power of it, and there's an element of I wish I could be that. They are the perfect man sort of thing. Yeah,
they're aspirational bodies. They're not necessarily bodies to desire. Yeah, they're bodies to aspire to.
A line for the ages.
Thank you.
You're full of them. Well, great. Anything else on your mind?
No, I kind of, I was glad to revisit them, and actually, sorry, there is one last thing on my mind, actually. So I remember as a kid growing up in the 70s, and let's say, when I was 16 or whatever, and you're reading about these great classics of American cinema, really, and they were 30s, 40s, 50s, right? I.e., from 40 to 20 years previous, right? Kind of Commando is now what? 35 years old.
Yep.
And we're still watching it, right? So even though it's not a very good film and so on, I mean, actually, it has to be considered a classic of a kind, yeah? Because if you think, how many films from 1985 are we actually watching? Probably not that many, So it is kind of one of those that's still in circulation.
Well, Back to the Future is one. Yeah, that would stand up. Everyone still watches that.
Yes.
The highest grossing films that year, let's see how many we still watch. Back to the Future, Rambo First Blood Part 2,
No.
Rocky 4.
Not really.
The Colour Purple.
Not well, some people do, but not really. I would say not really.
Out of Africa.
No.
Cocoon.
No.
The Jewel of the Nile.
No. Well, actually, yes. that every time that plays on television, you have people starting to talk about it, right? It's very enjoyable. Yeah.
Witness.
No, I've seen all of these, and actually, I'm sure that somebody is watching them somewhere, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about popularly, like still in the blood flow of.
They're not playing on television very often, are they? Right.
The last two are The Goonies and Spies Like Us. The Goonies still has a big cultural cachet.
Yeah, The Goonies definitely. Spies Like Us, I don't even remember what that is.
No, I've never seen it. John Landis, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd. It's a comedy.
That's why. Definitely not.
But this all actually just adds up to what I think, which is that the 80s is the shittest decade for cinema.
Well, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I think what's interesting is that, kind of this is a film that continues to be seen where many don't. And the ones you mentioned, they were the most successful of the era. But it would be interesting, to go, below the 40s, yeah? Kind of, and see what films crop up, because, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films made every year. Very few continue to be watched 35 years later.
I'll have a quick scan down the alphabetical list, just quickly. I'll pick some out. Agnes of God.
No, that's a Jane Fonda. I've seen that. That's
Brazil, Terry Gilliam.
Yes.
That sticks out. The Breakfast Club.
That scene, yeah.
Clue, the
no
mystery one. That people still think about it, but it's not like liked. It's just people still.
I saw that recently. It's awful.
Which ending did you get?
Oh, I can't remember.
Day of the Dead, the third Romero zombie one.
I imagine that has a big audience. Yes,
certainly in the horror fraternity, people. Yeah. Oh, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. That's in there.
Yes, that people see. Anyway, let's not go through the whole list. My point is just that there are not many, that it's a classic of a kind, right? 35 years later, people are still watching it, right? Which is significant. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say, because, the films that were being talked about from 1935, in 1970 or from 1945 and 1980 were considered classics just by virtue of lasting, right? Now, there may be other aesthetic criteria that they don't meet, but actually, lasting is in itself something worth noting.
I'll mention two more. Weird Science, which is another John Hughes.
Yes.
And Shoah, the huge Holocaust. That was 1985. Yes. So.
That's interesting, yes. I think that the reputation of that one has only increased over the years, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty.
I'm not watching that for this though. No. 9 hours long.
I saw it all at the cinema. I think over 2 nights.
Oh, right.
No, over 2 nights. But I think it was like 4.5 hours each time. It was quite something.
Yeah.
All right, so
Jolly good.
let's wrap this up.
I had a reasonably good time watching. Well, actually, a very good time watching Commando. Once I got into the swing of things, didn't really care for Predator. It matched more of what my expectations of films from this era and type are.
Yeah.
But no real sense of humour about itself, which is a bit of a killer for me. Like I do like films to be able to at least mock themselves when they're this silly, which Commando does. So I enjoyed it.
I had fun. And it kind of evoked memories of, watching them when they came out. So, if you get a chance, you could do worse. They're not great films. I think the most that could be said is that, Commando is just like kind of fun, really, However, that said, they're worth watching if you're interested in questions of, representation of masculinity in the films, of stardom, of kind of all of the things that actually the figure of Schwarzenegger himself, has come to represent and how that's evolved over the years. So, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube to listen to us. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Get to the chopper!